No, it's fine,
me.
sure.
Now I'm a collector, what are you gonna do?
Sure.
So, you can maybe talk about this one painting for the audience.
Yeah.
And then we'll open it up to everyone else.
Yeah,
And I'll shut up, David.
Yeah, well, in terms of relation to the Ashcan School, is like, that's the part that really makes me interested in what you said, because Bellows is certainly a fantastic force in American art, and the fact that he was a student with Hopper together when they were both young, and then Bellows died younger, and he wasn't that young, but he died young.
He did.
And then Hopper's work really matured and grew in his 80s, and they both have elements in their work that profoundly move me, and aside the fact that they're very American, they were also a generation that really were aware of Europe.
Well, and Bellows really
yeah.
conceives the compositions that are a lot like this, in the frieze-like procession of figures moving left and right.
Well, he was interested in that guy, what's his name, Jay Hambridge, who wrote a book, who taught at the
Dynamic symmetry and
Dynamic Symmetry, taught at the league. In late Bellows, he used a lot of these kind of geometry. He was trying to paint like Veronese, and he was using Jay Hambridge's theories to do it.
is that something you use too, or do you?
No, well, I try to learn about that stuff,
Uh-huh.
but it's a lot of it escapes me. There's a wonderful book that Dover's got now that's full of this mathematical stuff, and but
Is it too formulaic for you?
no, it's too dense for me to understand.
Uh-huh.
I don't have enough math, but you know, like I really.
So tell us about the groupings.
Well, I had a study, right? So I always use, I'm very classical minded, so whenever I make a painting, and I can say this, when I generally make a painting, I don't want to put myself in a position where I can't do this, but I try to have a center of interest. And then I try to and I also think of European painting as being ironical. And I think.
How so?
Well.
What do you mean by that?
Well, most of European art was either based on the church or monarchy, so the art was structured that way. You had, and the philosophy of living was that. So so when painters worked, they had a subject, and they made the subject, even if it was a subject that was off-center, like Bruegel having Icarus fall, the subject was still predominant, and they wanted the viewer, even if he didn't sense it immediately, like in Bruegel's case, to realize after they meditated that was the subject, even if it wasn't evident right away. Sometimes, like Bruegel, they'd make something called children's games, like something like that, where they wouldn't have there would be a kind of but that was really unusual. Most European painting has a center of interest and has secondary and tertiary relationships.
Yeah, Bruegel is the delayed bomb.
Yeah.
You look at it.
But not in all,
suddenly it dawns on you.
in many of his pictures, and some, not all of them, but and in portraits, really, that's the case. In religious paintings, it's certainly the case. And so for me, I start out with what do I want to say, right? So right away, I'm thinking I want to make what I'm looking at when I'm going up and down the stairs, which is a crowd of people watching a guy doing a dance step. And it's really like a spectacle. It's like I hear this music. It's like, I love it and hate it at the same time. I mean, I'm hearing drumming. It's driving me nuts. And at the same time, it's like it's incredibly alive. It's like what we're all. It's more alive than than any theater that pretends to be alive. It's like it's street theater. It's like because the spectator's a part of the theater. It's not just the person doing the show. Everybody there is part of it, right? So that's the subject, which is very exciting. So I started out there, where I start out with a kind of a geometrical box, and I want to have a couple of escape valves. On the left, I structured the picture where your eye is going to go way back, and that's a Hans Hopman theme, even though over there it's not done with color. And then on the right side, and this is where from Paul, right? You drop down into the stairway. So the space drops this way on the right, and on the left, it goes like that. So it's, and in the center, it's stable. So right away, I have three spaces, right? Because that's another theory of balance, is that you use the number 3, like juggling, right? 2 is uninteresting, 4 is already
asymmetrical and
dynamic. Asymmetrical. So the dynamic is 3, so you have 3 spaces. So I'm saying this without even thinking it. In other words, I didn't plan this in my head. I'm looking at that, and I'm thinking how because I know the way I think, and I know where it came from. This is not a plan, this is how it worked. And then I made a color plan of what would be red, what would be blue, what would be green, what would be bright, what would be light, what would be dark. And I tried to do it as much as I could. And I did it at this scale, and I did a lot of them, in very thick paint, very fast. And I worked out the poses, and I could visualize people as I'm doing it. I mean, in other words, well, here's a guy with his hand on a girl's ass. Here's a guy picking another guy's pocket. In other words, I would be working very freely in paint, but I'm thinking I'm not thinking of the finished painting, I'm thinking of what I want to do, where the figure's going to be, and what color it's going to be, and I'll make this plan. So I went up with this plan. And then I have to start. So I scale the whole thing up from the color sketch, usually using the grid, and I have my whole general layout, and I do very rough outlines where I think where the figures are going to be. And I start at one point. And in these two paintings, I actually started from the left and went to the right, actually, in fact. And then you can do that to a degree, and then you can't. Then you got to go back, because that works for a while, and then it doesn't work. But so in this painting, I actually started with this. I started with this girl.
This girl?
The girl with the black raincoat. And then I went this way, and then I had a hole over there, and I went back to that. I had to figure out that. But that was later. So I mean, I have to leave in order to make stuff interesting for myself. Some guesswork, otherwise I'm just rendering something, I'm not really making a painting. So you have to leave there has to be some kind of reason to get up in the morning and go to the studio. Not that you're just doing a job. So, and then you wind up getting into trouble too. You wind up, there's all kinds of trouble. There's all kinds of things that have to be figured out, even what's the space between these bars? At some point they're too small, another point they're too big. I'm not using a photograph. What's the right point, even if it's not real? What's the right rhythm, to go across? And then, this is my granddaughter. Although I didn't use in that painting I used my son-in-law and my daughter. In this painting I just put my granddaughter. And this was always something I had in the back of my mind, because the Rembrandt Night Watch has a little girl in there. And everybody said, when I was a kid, that might be Saskia as a girl.
Like Los Bohemians by Velasquez, right?
Yeah, Los Bohemians, yeah.
Absolutely.
In the Rembrandt, you have this little girl in the middle of the night watch. It's huge crap. And she's yellow, and it's one of the most mysterious, and it's a piece of light coming out, and you think of what that represents, a little girl in the middle of all this dark and sad. So, that was something that I alluded to, because it came from the Rembrandt, and I carried that over. That was always in my mind. I couldn't make the kid yellow in there. So there was another reason.
Because of the other colors.
Because the other guy was wearing a yellow, and even though these two were wearing yellow, it would work. If those two wore yellow, it wouldn't work. But these two wore yellow because there's only two of them. For some, what I'm saying? In other words, if there was another figure, this wouldn't work. But it works with only two of them. I don't know why, but that's what it. So.
Well, your eye tells you.
Yeah, and then I put an adjacent yellow, which was just so that I could have some kind of harmony, right? And then
transition.
Another kind of yellow, which is one goes to warm, the other goes to cold. But all of this is and then I always knew that we'd render there. And then my dear friend Julio was in both paintings, which is, and this is an incredible private joke between us, because Julio worked for years and years at Con Ed. And at 2 in the morning, I'd be walking drunk down Wall Street, and Julio would come up out of a manhole. Right?
So there's a manhole painting yet to be done.
Yeah, it's a manhole painting. Yeah, but this is my manhole. So he's in that as well as this, so it's rougher here. So I'm always thinking of Julio's head coming up out of. So that's yeah, and then. This guy appears in a lot of the paintings. This is definitely a plan, because I needed, you see the way the reds are balanced too? I mean, that comes from Paul, really, the way the reds are spotted. That's also that balance thing,
And what about the beauty of the red dresses, showing all that skin? One of your wives,
What about
perhaps?
her? Well, I need, you know, I think I got to that point where I said I needed a little, I'm walking this way.
Yeah.
I'm saying there's
So
not
are we.
enough sex in this painting.
Right.
So I gotta put a little bit of sex in, just a little bit
That's
more
what we're
sex.
waiting for, Don.
Just a
No
little,
issue.
you know, because it's all a balance of stuff, and it's a kind of like you're writing a novel or something, as well as making a painting. You know, so it's a combination of a lot of stuff, and it keeps me focused and interested until the last stroke, which was actually that sign up there, because the problem was, how do you paint that weird fluorescent light without it being a photorealist? How do you get that color? And I did it by using an old Holland cadmium green light and putting it against a violet, a dark black violet, and it bounces enough. So I didn't want it to dominate the painting, but just enough to give that kind of buzz, right? And it also, you know, it makes the greens interesting too, because in that painting there's a lot more greens, but I have two big greens here.
Come on, Don, who's the girl in the dress? Fess up.
Oh, no, they're all models, Charlie. I swear to God. I swear to
okay.
God, yeah. In this painting.
I don't believe you.
No, in this painting. I swear. The only personal thing is my granddaughter.
Yeah.
I've seen her.
Should we
David,
open
is
it
there
up to-
something,
Yeah, this is going on, maybe.
No, I want
Is
to
there something
know.
very personal that, you know, something that you'd want to ask either David or Don?
Yeah, I had a question regarding this particular painting. Given that New York has moved from, you mentioned New York used to, in the 70s, 80s, used to be very gritty, very dirty, very crime-ridden, etc. But it's still very vibrant, as I've been reading about the punk rock scene and stuff like that happened in CBGBs and stuff, to now where everything is pretty much, for lack of a better term, antiseptic. I mean, everything is clean, whitewashed, whatever you want to call it. I'm looking at this image, I look at this and it reminds me of what I'm seeing now. Was that conscious or unconscious, given that your style of painting is much more of a figurative nature?
No, it's now. And if you saw my paintings from the 80s, you'd say, hey, that looks like the 80s. And I don't think you can help it. I don't think you even have to try to do that.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think you need to be conscious or self-conscious about it. I think if you allude to it, if you just try to paint what's around you. I mean, the first time I saw figurative work that excited me, that was contemporary, was the Evencorn show in Poindexter Gallery way back. And I think I was a student, and he was painting L.A. And I remember seeing there was a painting of a knife in the water. It was just a knife in a glass of water. There was another painting of looking at it was in a car, which came from a Hopper painting, but it just felt like contemporary San Francisco, the Bay Area, everything. You know, it just felt like that. And he was using abstract expressionist techniques. And Hopper does that too. He doesn't have to try very hard. And it's one of the most exciting things about representational painting, and not enough younger painters are doing this, because people want to see something, they want to see their life depicted by an artist who can bring something to it besides a machine, the way a machine does, like a camera. I love photography, but it's a different medium, and it's a mechanical thing. It's a machine. It's a manipulated machine that's done very artfully and beautifully by people who know how to do it better. But photographers don't have the control a painter has, you know, in all the structural means, all the means. And it's something that I wanted to happen when I was younger, and I haven't seen it happen. It's something that disappoints me. But I try to do
it now.
I'd like to see, you know, people doing it. More people doing it now. You do it. Morgan does it. There's a lot of people who are doing it. But I'd like to see it much more ubiquitous than it is. You know, in fact, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also had a second question. You mentioned the use of the influences of classical figurative work and such. The gentleman who's breakdancing, what strikes me is that he's sort of like center and he's shining. I mean, he's coming out. But also what comes to mind is Icarus. And I'm not sure if that's...
Falling figure,
Yes.
yeah. You know, the thing is that if you start doing this stuff, and if you look at a lot of old paintings like I have, you know, stuff is going to work its way in your work without you knowing it. You know, I mean, it's just going to wind up there, and I'm quite sure that that's true. I'm quite sure that, you know, because people point things out to me all the time. And I'd like to take credit for it, but the only credit I have is that when I was about 30 years old, I had first gotten married to my first wife. we took a tent, and I had a little Volkswagen, and I went to every city in Europe, and we camped out, and I went to every single museum I could find, and I stood in front of paintings, and because I think it's the only way to learn anything about art, is to put yourself in front of a painting, plant your feet there and just look. And it's just so much in my blood I mean, those people are like family to me. I mean, in the sense, not that I put myself in the same category, but in the sense that mentally, I want to be, with them mentally. So, because I love them so much. So, the elements of all their work, all these people, and, I don't have any. I have a lot of favorites, but they're going to wind their way. And there used to be something actually called a classical pose and a rogue pose, a fugitive pose, right? That was a classical term. I mean, that was a real classical term. And it meant, that because they had a whole series of poses, like David, or like Greek poses.
That went with certain content.
They were done over and over
Right.
again. And then the artist who did the fugitive pose, like for instance, Brouwer,
Yeah.
which if you look at those little pictures I made, or even these, a lot of the figures in my work come from different, even if they're unconscious, but some of them are even conscious. I mean, he made pictures of people in bars fighting, like
Having their teeth pulled.
and having their teeth
Or peeing in the corner.
Yeah, peeing in the corner. I mean, it's all that stuff, and it's in my work. I try to pull out. I mean, I love the whole tradition so much that there are very few corners that I don't love. So I just try to use what I can. And I don't eschew it, if it's not the word, eschew it. If that's if it works its way in there, it's fine. It's fine. If that answers your question.
In a way, that's the kaleidoscopic nature of what tradition has become for both of us, actually.
I think that's true. Yeah, and you use many illusions in your work
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
I can see Puvi, I can see.
And they pop up. The paintings tell us what to do,
Yeah,
in some real sense.
yeah.
Don, your future model Douglas has a question.
Sorry. Yeah.
So, Don, I truly appreciate that you were speaking of the evolution of figurative painting, and I know it's not effortless, but I feel as if you include that evolution kind of effortlessly in your paintings. And I have one curiosity question, and it's Times Square. And there's a young lady off to the right with a simple gray dress on,
Yeah,
and her feet are bare.
yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's a pose that it's familiar, but I can't.
I'll tell you where that comes from.
Yes.
La Dolce Vita.
Uh-huh.
That's Monica Vitti, is that? Who is the girl who walked out of the
Nina Ekberg.
Nina Ekberg, that's Nina Ekberg, yeah, but it's not Nina Ekberg, but,
And Anuka May.
yeah.
Anuka May, right?
Anuka May?
She was in the back of the car with Mastroianni.
That's right.
Right, Anuka May, with sunglasses.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, that was an allusion to that, because Times Square reminds me, it's like, I thought it would just, you try to surprise, if you go into pictures, you have to look, right? You want to have little surprises, and, you're free to do that, but it definitely comes from there, yeah.
We have one last question. There's a person in the back, and we'll do two. There could be right in front of one another.
Fred, sorry.
I had kind of a technical question about how you work with the models, because it seems like you're a constructivist. You start out, you kind of imagine a scene, and it's not like a snapshot that you saw this and you kind of reconstruct it. You're using everything from your background, from what you've actually seen in real life. And so you do this sketch, as I see it, but you don't know who the people are going to be. You kind of have general characters. Then I wonder, when you do the large painting,
Yeah.
you're going from maybe left to right, you
Yeah.
have somebody there, whether at that point you say, I need a model, and you get somebody to pose in that pose, and you're
Yeah.
painting right from them on the painting.
Yeah, that's correct, and sometimes if I don't know, say if I get a person in red, and I get the person in, the person in green starts to get more specific, because they have to relate to the person in red. So in other words, if I have a male, maybe I'll want a female. If I'll have somebody black, maybe I'll want somebody white. If I have somebody tall, maybe I'll want somebody short. If I have somebody skinny, maybe I'll want somebody, in other words, young or old. I mean, I'll try to make a cross section of how I want the general feeling to be. yeah.
So that's growing as you're painting.
Yeah, it starts to happen in the
One
picture,
person
yeah.
paint Another person.
Yeah, because you want the feeling to, you want there to be an authentic crowd, you know, authentic. In fact, I have trouble getting enough older people and enough kids. I mean, you know, it's hard to do that, which I work at to do, but,
Don,
Yeah.
it's 7:46, the lecture goes to 8, so I can ask one more question. As an art world,
Could you hold it for a minute?
No, I can't.
Okay.
If you have one thing to tell your audience in terms of getting these images out there, wouldn't you want them to spend the reception taking pictures of your work on their cell phones and sending them out on Instagram, even though you don't know what that is? Right, David? And you don't know what it is either, right? So shouldn't everyone in the room, including blushing Craig Watson, and Sylvie Ball, our sound and vision coordinator, is videotaping it, right?
oh, really? I didn't know
Shouldn't
that.
everybody, while they're having some wine on Denise Bibro's bill, be taking pictures and sending them out on social media?
Sure.
Okay, got that, everybody? Don't be shy, okay, right, Heather?
Yes.
Anyway,
Okay, you've got the floor again,
It's kinda
David.
like-
Sorry to interrupt.
There's,
Your question a little bit.
oh,
Sorry.
you had the next one.
Yeah.
I think I'll take
Goes
them
back
off,
to a little bit of a
right?
technical question, but I know you don't use photographs, and when you talk about constructing the models and the composition, where you're gonna put them, you're kind of like sketching it out and figuring it out. So in this painting, I'm just wondering, what do you do about the architecture? Are you making that up too, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fact that particular place in Times Square is not there.
That,
You know, so,
Yeah.
and the ads aren't at the same time.
gotcha.
And the whole thing is completely fabricated.
I mean,
And,
the left corner almost looks like Feininger a little, you know, that kind of smooth.
yeah, it's all fabricated. And
Yeah.
I got the table and chairs from Times Square. And actually, I'll tell you another funny thing about this painting. I painted this painting before I had the table and chairs. The Times Square Association gave me the table and chairs, but I had to prove that I was a painter. So I sent them a photograph of this when it wasn't finished. And I said, we love everything, but we don't like the Elmos. You know, because they don't like, they want to be, they don't like, commercially, they don't want to have the superheroes there, the Times Square. But they gave me the table and chairs anyway.
There's always something.
But I had drawn the legs of the table incorrectly. And when I got the real table, I had to go over everything. But they looked okay, incorrect. So I had to torture myself, make something that was just as good. So so that I went back and did it. And then all the other pictures were done, all the other Times Square pictures, I had the tables and chairs, so I had to have them in my studio along with the Elmo costumes and stuff, so, yeah. And, so.
Well, thank you, join us.